Hello, I am a woman who got divorced after 5 years of marriage. There is an old saying that you can't truly know a person no matter how long you have known them, and it seems to be true. I lived with my husband for 5 years, but now I have come to know his dark side. Perhaps I was too oblivious, or perhaps my husband was too clever. I don't know which is right, but I am fortunate to know the truth now. It is common for people to consider divorce at least once during their marriage, but often they are held back by thoughts of their children, financial stability, and societal expectations. I was no exception. If it weren't for one particular day, I may have stayed in my marriage even after facing conflicts. This is the story of my marriage, when I was in a dark place and finally found the courage to escape and start a new, happy life. The luck of a person's childhood often depends on the abilities of their parents, and this was the case for me as well. My father owned a fairly large trading company, and I never had to worry about money growing up. However, life is not always smooth sailing. There are bound to be rough and even muddy roads along the way. Just when it seemed like my family would never have to worry about money, we were hit with a crisis when my father's business partner embezzled money and fled abroad. This caused my father, who had dedicated his life to the company, to lose it at the age of 60, along with a friend of 40 years. Fortunately, my brother and I were already married and independent, so we were not directly impacted. However, my parents suffered greatly. Even now, when I think back to that time, it brings tears to my eyes. They didn't want to burden us with their pain, so they dealt with it privately. When I got married, I was well off, living in a mansion and driving 3 cars. At the time, my older brother was living abroad, where he had married a local woman and found a job after completing graduate school. I got a job right after college and wanted to enjoy life after spending 16 years solely focused on studying. As a result, all of my paychecks went towards buying clothes and handbags. I was solely focused on my appearance. This led to my checking account always being empty. When my father saw my spending habits, he took extreme measures. He told me I had to pay $2,000 a month for my room and board, and if I was even a day late, he would kick me out of the house. Dad, people say that rich people are scary, and you are no exception. How could you even think of doing such a thing? Did you even think of getting money from your daughter? Other parents are anxious because they can't do more for their children. How much richer do you want to become after earning $2,000 with your daughter's hard work and dedication? Alright then, I'm going to leave home and become independent. I blurted out of anger, but in reality, I didn't even have a penny left to pay for the deposit and rent if I moved out. So I had no choice but to stay at my parents' house. And I had to pay $2,000 every month for my room and board to my mom. After taxes, my net pay was less than $3,000, from which I had to pay $2,000 for my room and board. So my hands trembled when I had to part with my hard-earned money. That's when I first learned the true value of money. When I had to pay all my credit card payments, transportation, and lunch expenses, I was always struggling with money trying to pay the bills. So I started packing my lunch every morning. Since I was paying for my room and board, I could freely eat as much as I wanted from the refrigerator, so lunch was included. By saving money on lunch, I had to live frugally. But in the eyes of others, I must have seemed like a responsible young lady. Male employees who were of the right age for marriage asked me out a lot. My husband was one of them, but I was not in a hurry to get married because I never dated nor enjoyed myself when I was a student. So I wanted to just enjoy dating, and I rejected all of them. But ironically, my rejections made them want to compete. Suddenly, I became a popular girl in the company. I caught the attention of the young bachelors. I honestly didn't mind the attention I received. My popularity meant that I was attractive to men. Then one day we had a company picnic, and by dinner time we were all drinking. We happened to play a game of truth or dare. My husband took advantage of that opportunity to confess his feelings for me. I wondered if it was because I was drunk or if I was genuinely interested in my husband, but I accepted his confession, and from that day on, we started dating openly. Fortunately, our company did not forbid in-house dating, so we dated without any problems. My husband was born into a middle-class family. He worked part-time like any other college student. He said he earned his tuition on his own. That was why his sense of money management was so thorough. He was well-versed in bank interest rates and investments. Compared to my husband, I was like a kindergartner when it came to financial planning. While dating my husband, for the first time in my life, I even kept track of my spending to learn how to budget and manage my money. Seeing the changes in me, my dad said, I don't know who he is, but you met a good boyfriend. When you have free time, bring him over to my office and I'll take you guys out to a nice restaurant. My father, who was always worried about his immature daughter, even before seeing my boyfriend, he already thought highly of him. While we dated for 2 years, my dad even remembered buying my husband's presents for his birthdays or holidays as if he considered my boyfriend to be his son-in-law early on. Because of the atmosphere like that, when there was talk of marriage, it was as if they were waiting for it naturally. It was the same with my in-laws. After we talked about getting married, I went to my in-laws for the first time, and my mother-in-law and all the sisters-in-law welcomed me. In that kind of atmosphere, I thought that the conflicts between in-laws would not apply to me. My husband and I were welcomed by both families, and I was able to prepare for the wedding smoothly. But when my brother heard the news of my marriage, he called me. Is he trustworthy? Because you're so immature, I should see your marriage partner myself and choose him for you. Hold on to your worries. Dad has already seen him, and he was the one who permitted me to marry. Do you still think that I'm a child? I have an eye for a good person too, so don't worry about me. You just take care of yourself. Still, my older brother was worried when his younger sister was getting married. He was video calling me practically every day when my wedding was near, and I became annoyed. He usually never even sent a single text message, so I didn't know why suddenly he was video calling me so often. My mom said it was all because my brother cared for me a lot, but he treated me, all grown up now, as an immature child, so in some ways I resented it. The first time my brother saw my husband was 2 days before the wedding. He took a vacation from his work and came with his wife. Was it because it had been a while since we were apart? Or he had a family of his own as the head of the family? But he seemed different from before. He had an atmosphere of a bit of an elder-like feeling. Anyway, my husband also seemed awkward with my brother. Frankly, there was a reason for that. The current financial situation of the in-laws was not good, so my dad bought our newlywed house for us. He was also paying for all the expenses of the wedding. When my brother heard that, he didn't like it at all. If you don't have enough money, then you should have just rented an apartment and started there. Why did you have to get help from mom and dad? How could you call that an independent life? That's why I don't consider you to have grown up at all. You have always been like that, but I don't like your husband who even accepted that. If you guys can't afford it, you didn't have to rush into marriage. You could have waited until you earned it yourselves. So why now? This is why I should have met him earlier. That is why I should have met him first, myself, and chosen the right guy for you. Even though my brother was right at the time, I resented his high-handed attitude. He treated us as if we were selfishly vying to use our parents' money, so I became emotional first. Why? Is it because you're afraid that your inheritance will be reduced later? Then why don't you ask Dad to buy you a new house? That would be fair, right? Would you be happy if your only sister lived in an old rented apartment? Monthly rent is common where you live, but among my friends, if I started my newlywed life in a rented apartment, everyone would look down on us. You've lived here for over 20 years. How could you say something like that? Robert, if you're gonna keep talking like that, you'd better not come to my wedding. Who are you to criticize my husband? I can take it if you do it to me, but I can't stand you doing that to my husband. In the end, my husband and my brother's wife had to witness my fight with my brother that day. We had planned to have a nice meal together before the wedding, but in the end, all 4 of us had to take pills for indigestion. Despite the commotion, the wedding went smoothly and my husband and I went on a great honeymoon. I was determined to start my married life in earnest. I quit my job when I got married and started taking cooking and other classes to prepare myself to be a great housewife. My husband also got promoted in his company soon after we got married, and my in-laws said it was all thanks to having a lucky charm like me as their daughter-in-law. My husband was also kind to my parents, treating them like his own. And thanks to that, my parents felt less sorry for their son's absence. Until then, I thought that our happiness would last forever. But just a year after we got married, my parents had to go through bankruptcy because of my dad's partner's embezzlement, as I mentioned earlier. When the company faced a financial emergency, my dad sold everything he owned, including his house, to pay for the employees' salaries and their pension fund. He said he couldn't ignore his employees who had worked and stood by him for the company all this time because they trusted my dad. In fact, he lived without a house in his later years while staying in a monthly rented studio apartment. At that time, I didn't even know my parents were in such a difficult situation. They were afraid that we would worry, so they didn't show it. I didn't even know what my dad was doing at that time. He only said that he got a job thanks to an acquaintance. My parents, who used to live in a mansion, had to move to a small studio. They couldn't take all their furniture, so they sent my belongings to my place. But my house was already filled with newlywed furniture, so when a room full of my things arrived, our house became stuffy. My husband got annoyed and asked if we could just throw it away or give it to someone else. There's no space to move around. If not, tell your dad to rent a container or put them in storage. How much does it cost to store your belongings in our house? They say that even if a rich man goes bankrupt, their wealth will last for 3 years. It's not that bad, is it? If there was anything to do with my family, he was the first one to rush over to help out. But after he heard that my father's business failed due to embezzlement, he talked as if it was none of his business. I felt offended, and we even had many fights over it. Then one day it was my mother's birthday, and I went to her parents' house with my husband, and my mom prepared steak for us. We wanted to take her out to buy something nice, but she stubbornly refused. She just said she wanted to eat at home. When she took out the nice set of china she used before and set the table, I felt as if I had finally come back to my parents' house. I felt happy to have a nice dinner, and we were on our way back when my husband suddenly sneered and said, "When you're in debt, you should hide your meat." But your parents live in that tiny place and still eat steaks, don't they? This is why the most pitiful people are those who live paycheck to paycheck. When business owners fail, they still do whatever they want and can eat anything, don't they? Honey, why do you say it like that? My dad had to give up his company overnight after working so hard all his life to build it up. And instead of keeping his money like others, he gave up everything he owned to pay his employees' salaries and even their pension fund. Are you telling me that they can eat whatever they want? Do you think my mom bought steaks just so they could eat them? It's because their son-in-law is coming. That's why she prepared them. But how could you say it like that? Now that we're talking, do you know that you have changed since my parents went bankrupt? You used to visit my parents so often, buying wines and all kinds of fruit, but when it was my mom's birthday, you only bought a small cake for her. Not only that, you used to refer to them as our father and our mother, but now you're calling them my parents. You shouldn't be like that. How kindly did my parents treat you? Didn't I want to do more? As you know, I'm the only one earning money now, so how could I do as much as before? And if I get promoted, it's not just my salary that increases, but also my workload. You may not know it because you're resting comfortably at home, but do you know how much stress and pressure I have at work these days? I feel like quitting several times a day, but I'm barely holding on. Before, I had a glimmer of hope that I could join your dad's company if I quit. But now I can't even do that, so I'm suffering a lot too. When I thought about it, it was true. With my husband's salary alone, it was tight to make ends meet, so we couldn't take care of my parents. I thought I should get a job, but it wasn't as easy as I thought. I didn't have much experience and hadn't worked for over 2 years, so I couldn't find a company that would hire me. Then one day I called my brother and complained, but he got mad at me. "You fool, you're just looking for a job that's easy for you, that pays a lot of money, so it's no wonder you can't find it. If you can't find anything, just work at a convenience store and work." I wanted to hang up if he was just going to be a crybaby over nothing. My only brother wouldn't worry about me and just yelled at his only sister. Honestly, at that time I thought, how could I work in a place so lowly like that? As my brother said, I was looking at jobs that would make me look good. When my brother hit the nail on the head, it hurt, but it also woke me up. After that, I sent resumes to all kinds of places. Then I got a few calls for an interview. The company I got accepted to was a small advertising company. Compared to my previous job, the salary was meager with poor fringe benefits, but I was thankful because it was the only company that offered me a job. When I started working, I quickly became mentally and physically exhausted. As a result, I became lax in doing household chores and did not contact my parents as often. I was busy trying to adapt to my new job when my mom called me. She was so furious that she was stuttering and whimpering. When I listened to her, I could understand why she was so upset. All this time, my dad kept a secret from me. He was working as a security guard for a building where my husband happened to be. His company's client was in that building. But what happened next was the problem. My husband asked my dad to valet park his car, but in front of other people, he handed him a pack of gum, telling him it was a tip. How could my husband act like that towards his father-in-law? If he was ashamed that his father-in-law was a security guard, then he should have just ignored him as if he didn't know him. Did he have to shame my father in front of others like that? If he did, then he should have apologized to my dad for doing so in front of other people. How could he act like that? When I heard about it from my mom, I was so upset that even my hands trembled. How embarrassed my father must have been, wearing his security guard uniform and running into his own son-in-law. He kept this secret from us because he didn't want us to know about it. That night I asked my husband, I heard that you met my dad a few days ago. Why didn't you tell me? He replied, I was so ashamed. I thought I was going to die. I was speechless. I went to my client's place, and he was working there as a security guard. My colleagues in my company do not know that your dad's company went bankrupt. So how could I say that he is my father-in-law? It's so embarrassing. And your dad too. Among so many jobs, why was he working as a security guard? Does he want to shame all his kids? Now that we're talking, please tell your dad to quit his work. I have my client's office there, so I have to go there often. And what would people say if they found out that their security guard is my father-in-law? It's so embarrassing. What? Embarrassing? So is that why you gave a pack of gum as a tip? Just so you won't be ashamed? Then what about my dad? Don't you think my dad has any pride? Ashamed of my dad? When you used to like it so much, when my dad treated you so well, but now are you ashamed of him? You shouldn't be that kind of person. You never know what would happen in life. Do you think my dad would remain like that? If he caught that bastard who stole our money, we could live as before. Then my husband laughed at me. It would be faster to find a needle in a haystack. How could you find someone who planned to run away like that? I knew all too well that it would be impossible to get the money back. However, when I saw my husband who started to show his true colors, I was so angry, so I just said it when he looked down on my parents. After that, we started to use separate rooms. I realized that my husband would never be on my side when I saw him changing so completely when my parents became poor. The true test of a relationship is how a person changes in the face of adversity. However, I couldn't get divorced because of my parents. If I got divorced, my parents might blame themselves. So even if I would get divorced, I wanted to be able to stand on my own. And do it then. I wanted to take care of my parents on my own. Thus, my hellish life continued. My husband and I lived as roommates, nothing more and nothing less. We became distant. There was another incident that led to this situation. That day, it was my dad's birthday, but my husband told me to just go by myself. Hey, when there's nothing to eat, even beggars won't go. In the end, since my dad's company failed, he had nothing to get out of my dad, so he wasn't going. Really? Then I don't have to go to your house too. I have never received anything from your family, nor do I have anything to receive even now. So we cut our ties to each other's family. My mother-in-law and sisters-in-law would come over to our house and complain about why I wasn't acting like a daughter-in-law. But I ignored them. I wanted to say that it should be a two-way street, but I held my tongue. After working for 2 years, I changed my job. My new job paid a higher salary with better fringe benefits. I worked very hard, and I was recognized for my abilities at work. Then I started to feel more confident in myself. I thought it wouldn't take long. However, my husband's chances of getting promoted seemed slim. He used to brag about his in-laws, but after people found out that my dad's company failed, it seemed he wasn't as sought after as before. He would buy beer every night and drink by himself at the dining room table, sighing deeply. When I saw him like that, I did feel sorry for him. But when I thought about what he did to my parents, I didn't want to console him. I just ignored him. Then one day my brother called me. He said that he caught the person who embezzled my dad's money and ran off. My brother had hired a private detective to look for him. Even though it seems like a big world, actually it's not, and one connection after another would show a trail. He said if we went to court, it would take years, plus upfront attorney and court fees would be exorbitant, which we didn't have, especially if that person used their brains and took on a large law firm to fight us. He recommended an out-of-court settlement in exchange for cash. He asked me to persuade our dad. How could you say that? They should be sent to prison. What I'm saying is, let's negotiate for now, and we can pursue punishment later. Right now it's already been reported to the police, but here, they are living as an illegal alien, so it's only a matter of time before they get found out and deported. They would have to live on the run or go back to the US and get arrested. Even if we don't do anything, they can't live in peace. If so, it would be better to get some cash. Eventually, our dad decided to follow my brother's recommendation and got some money back. After that, a few months had passed. I came in after having lunch with my coworkers, and my husband came to see me. He looked bright when he saw my face and grabbed my hand. "Honey, now we will be okay," he said loudly, causing my coworkers to start whispering. So I took my husband and went outside. Then he had tears in his eyes and hugged me, begging for my forgiveness. "I'm sorry. I was a jerk. Please forgive me. I must have lost my mind. I was having a hard time at work, so I went crazy. Let's go back to how we were before. Please." I wondered why he was acting so strangely all of a sudden. "Did you know that your dad bought a building? I went to look to rent an office today and I saw your dad there." I was so surprised. I thought he was working there as a security guard, but something happened and he has become the building owner. I guess there is hope after all. This is how I will be saved. "Honey, could you talk to your dad about giving me an office space? Even if I got a loan against our house, it wouldn't be enough." "What are you talking about? How could you get a loan and use my house as collateral? And what's this about an office space?" I found out that my husband got fired from his job. He went around looking for a job, but he couldn't find one, so he decided to start a business. But he didn't have enough money, so he was going to secretly get a loan against my house. You make me laugh. That house was given to me by my dad in my name, so how could you use it as collateral? You never paid a cent towards that mortgage, and it was paid by my dad, so how dare you put your hands on my property? Also, it's none of your business whether my dad bought a building or an airplane. Who was it to cut his ties to my parents' house because there was nothing to eat there? But as soon as you smelled money, you ran over like a beggar, didn't you? You're nothing but a piece of garbage. Don't say any more nonsense. Pack your stuff and leave. Do you know how long I've waited for this moment? If you took one wrong step, I was going to give you the divorce papers to sign and be done with you. I gritted my teeth for this moment to come. Honey, why are you being like that? I know I did wrong, but we have lived together all this time. Don't you have any sympathy for me? What sympathy? You were so ungrateful. So I don't have any sympathy when you sure didn't have any for my parents. So shut up and just get out of my house now. My husband sobbed and begged, but I pushed him away coldly and came back to my work. I was so upset that I was trembling all over. After 5 years of marriage, I became single again. My parents are living with me in the house they bought me. Just like there are 4 seasons in life, there is spring and autumn and winter. Now that the winter is gone, spring will return. We never know when the spring will be gone but I want to enjoy it fully with my parents. I hope you will experience spring in your lives too. Please cheer for me and share your words of wisdom in the comments section. Liking and subscribing is a big help to me. Take care.